Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman. On the show tonight, what local VA hospitals are doing to treat veterans with COVID-19. Reverend Marshall Hatch on his recent loss and how the coronavirus is ravaging Chicago's Black community. And a virtual tour of artwork made by soldiers and combat veterans. But first, this Memorial Day weekend is reportedly one of the deadliest the city has seen in years. 9 people were shot and killed over the weekend, another 27 wounded. Now that's despite the stay-at-home order and additional police officers being deployed. That's higher than Memorial Day 2019 when 7 people were killed and 34 were injured. This year's numbers could end up as high or higher than 2015 when 12 people were killed and 43 were wounded. Chicago police broke up a rally, a Reopen Illinois rally at Grant Park this afternoon.
In fact, today is a real-life case in point of exercising constitutional rights versus unconstitutional city decrees, state orders.
That's right.
If we ever give up that right,
We're doomed.
we're going to ruin the fabric of what it means to be an American.
Yeah.
Demonstrators gathered at Buckingham Fountain saying the shutdown caused by the pandemic is a violation of constitutional rights. In a statement, the Chicago Police Department says the participants were not social distancing or following public health guidelines outlined in the stay-at-home order. And neither Mayor Lori Lightfoot nor Governor J.B. Pritzker held any public events today, but both released videos in honor of Memorial Day, the mayor laying a wreath at the Eternal Flame in honor of those who served.
Due to the historic COVID-19 crisis, this Memorial Day is unlike any we've ever experienced, a fact which is difficult on all of us.
We've persevered through wars and economic challenges with the help of those willing to sacrifice for their country. And we will defeat this virus because you've stood together, but socially distant, as one community for the greater good.
Today, Illinois recorded the fewest number of COVID-19 related deaths since early April. The Department of Public Health says 31 people died in the last 24 hours from the illness for a total of 4,884. An additional 1,700 people have tested positive, bringing the state's total number of positive cases to more than 112,000. The state's rolling 7-day positivity rate, now that's a key factor in moving to the next phase of reopening, is 12%. Yesterday, the governor released more specific guidelines for businesses to follow in phase 3. You can find out more about those on our website. Up next, how local veterans hospitals are dealing with the coronavirus pandemic.
This evening's presentation of Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by ComEd, powering lives.
We have a tremendous source of untapped, efficient energy right here in our school.
Let her rip, Jenny.
I kind of love this idea.
The ComEd Energy Efficiency Program has real ideas for making schools energy efficient.
Pedal faster.
Memorial Day is traditionally a day to honor fallen members of the armed forces. This year, though, the COVID-19 pandemic has emerged as a new war for many veterans. The Department of Veterans Affairs is reporting 907 confirmed cases of the virus amongst veterans and VA staff in Illinois, 157 of which remain active. The VA also reports 36 deaths. Local VA hospitals have had to shift to treat the virus, especially among a population that has a high rate of pre-existing conditions. To hear more about how they're doing it, we have Dr. Sarah Unterman, Chief of Staff at the Jesse Brown VA Medical Center in Chicago, and Dr. Jeffrey Oken, Deputy Chief of Staff at Edward Hines Jr. VA Hospital in Hines, Illinois, just south of West Suburban Maywood. Welcome both of you to Chicago Tonight.
Thank you. Thanks.
So, Dr. Oken, let's start with you, please. How has Hines shifted gears to treat veterans with COVID-19?
So what we did at Hines is we redeployed the locations of our intensive care units to be able to make one intensive care unit for COVID patients and then one for non-COVID patients, and then one could be flexed depending on what the need was. We also made a negative airflow complete ward to treat the COVID patients, sealing off the ends, having a specialized room to enter so that appropriate PPE, personal protective equipment, could be placed before going into the room. We also have changed how we've done our outpatient. We've transitioned from what was traditionally face-to-face visits to now using face-to-face visits less and using telephone, VA Video Connect, and e-consultation more.
And Dr. Underman, what about you all? How have you all sort of shifted gears to treat COVID-19 patients at Jesse Brown?
Many of our strategies were similar to Heinz. We redirected resources from our clinics and procedural areas to our intensive care unit, and we opened a new COVID inpatient unit adjoining our intensive care unit for COVID patients. We redirected quite a bit of our proceduralists, so our physicians and nurses involved in performing procedures, to the intensive care unit to take care of these critically ill patients.
And Dr. Unterman, have you seen particularly high rates of COVID-19 at your hospital compared to other hospitals or populations?
Compared to other VA facilities in our region, we have seen more COVID positive patients, but in relation to other Chicago area hospitals, it's somewhat similar rates, if even perhaps somewhat less.
Dr. Oken, how are you all doing on PPE, personal protective equipment, and other supplies? Do you have enough, but also how do you know that you are maintaining the right amount?
Right, so we have been, for the past, say, 3 to 4 months, tracking on a daily basis how much PPE we have in stock, how much we are using, where we are using it, and continuing to order more personal protective equipment as we use it up. And so that actually has been extremely effective in keeping us ahead of the curve, ensuring both safety of our veterans as well as safety of our staff.
Dr. Unterman, are there common pre-existing conditions that are often seen in veterans that put them at greater risk for the novel coronavirus?
Yes, we have a high population of patients who already have lung disease and kidney disease, amongst other conditions such as diabetes, hypertension, vascular disease. All of these comorbidities do put them at greater risk of more severe illness if they contract COVID.
And Dr. Oken, how are veterans who might not have life-threatening or serious medical need able to get treatment during this pandemic?
So the great thing about being in the VA healthcare system is the opportunities we have to deliver care. We have a uniform medical record that can be accessed from anywhere in the country, and we can deliver them visits. If it's urgent and we need to do face-to-face, we will. If we can do it by telephone or by VA Video Connect, which is a video connection service for VA, or we can do an electronic consultation, which allows the specialty consultant to review their chart, make a recommendation, and contact the veteran and talk to them about that. So many different options, and the great thing is we can deliver the right care at the right time using the right method of service delivery.
And Dr. Unterman, obviously mental health is a very important issue for veterans. What does treatment look like for those patients right now in need of mental health services?
A significant amount of our outpatient mental health care has transitioned to virtual modalities, as Dr. Oken was mentioning, telephone, VA Video Connect. We've even moved our group therapy sessions to video modalities. But that being said, if and when a veteran is in crisis, or if their clinician feels that they would be better served in person, then we see them in person to assist them as appropriate.
Dr. Oken, what would you say are some of the challenges or the shortfalls of using telehealth to treat patients?
You know, I think that on the veteran side, many of them like to see their practitioners that they have relationships with. That's a disadvantage to not being able to see them. They also, what we found is that the connection on the other end, and so in order to do it well, you have to, one, have to have the electronic equipment. 2, you have to know how to use it. And 3, you have to have a good Wi-Fi connection or signal through your phone. Those can sometimes be barriers. on the veteran side. On the provider side, our providers actually are well tuned into this. We're long before COVID, and we've just been able to use it as able in this pandemic.
And Dr. Unterman, what would you say are some of the challenges?
So we've had feedback from some of our patients involved in groups that they don't connect as well with other members of their group when they're not in person. So that has been a challenge, and due to our social distancing efforts, bringing back in-person group therapy sessions is going to take some creativity going forward. But that's really the biggest challenge that we've heard from our patients. In general, our patients have been very grateful for the opportunity to still continue their care without needing to put themselves at risk by coming to the medical center in person.
And Dr. Oken, as you look toward reopening your hospitals and clinics, what are the plans to make sure that your patients and your staff are both safe?
So safety is our #1 priority. And as we've developed our plans to open back up, which includes social distancing, it includes how do we rearrange our waiting rooms, how do we reduce that wait time so people don't have to wait and they get into the exam rooms, we're looking at alternating face-to-face visits with a telemode visit so that we have time to clean the rooms in between adequately. Those are all things that are important. We have one message we want to send to our veterans. It's #Heinz is here. We are here for you in whatever way you feel comfortable, because we want the veterans to feel safe to come back to Heinz. And if they're not feeling that, we don't want them to delay care. And so we encourage them, if they aren't feeling like they want to come back, let's look at other modalities to get that care that they require.
And Dr. Unterman, I understand you all recently had a success story at your hospital with a man who was on a ventilator and was able to get access to multiple different kinds of treatment.
Yes, we had an elderly gentleman who was admitted in our hospital for 2 months. He was on a ventilator for 22 days during that period. He received convalescent plasma, he received remdesivir, and once he was off the ventilator, he had very intensive physical and occupational therapy as part of our early mobility program. And he was actually able to be discharged a week earlier than anticipated because he did so well with his therapy, and he walked out of our hospital last week.
Okay, well, congratulations to him and to you all for that treatment. My thanks to Dr. Sarah Unterman and Dr. Jeffrey Oken.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, revisiting a poignant conversation Carol Maureen recently had with Reverend Marshall Hatch. But first, a look at the weather.
Don't miss one of our stories. Get them all delivered to your desktop or mobile device with a subscription to the WTTW News Daily Briefing. Go to WTTW.com/dailybriefing and sign up.
And now we revisit a compelling conversation our Carol Maureen had last month with a local pastor who has a very personal connection to the COVID-19 pandemic. Here's Carol.
Brandis, Black Chicagoans are almost 6 times more likely to die from the coronavirus than white Chicagoans, according to government data. Health inequalities caused by poverty, lack of access to health care, and systemic racism have long been recognized, but they have combined with the COVID-19 pandemic to create an even more combustible combination that is ravaging the African American community. One man who knows all of that much too well is Reverend Marshall Hatch, who has lost his eldest sister as well as his best friend to the virus, among others. Joining us now live, Pastor Hatch, senior pastor at the new Mount Pilgrim Church in West Garfield Park. Welcome to Chicago Tonight.
Thank you much for having us, Carol.
Will you tell us a little bit about your big sister, Rhoda?
Well, my big sister, Rhoda, was 20 years old when my mom died. I was 8, so she was the older sister and became almost like a surrogate mom, certainly a trailblazer in our family. She was the first to not go away to college, but to go to college, the first to become, a public school teacher. And she was just an incredible person. She played the organ for my father. My father pastored one church for 40 years, and then I've been a pastor 35 years. He passed in 81, so I kind of inherited her as my organist. And we had a tremendous relationship. She was great.
So you were a little boy when your mother passed, and she became your other mother.
Yeah, she passed. My mom passed in the snowstorm of 1967. We were living in a public housing, Jane Addams public housing, and the ambulance couldn't get down the side street, Ada. And so it was a pivotal event in the life of our family. And my sister Rhoda became the real trailblazer that, became a surrogate mom for me as well. And just a friend by the time we had, gotten up in years. She was an incredible human being.
Did she have, Pastor, underlying health issues? Were there other complications that COVID-19 took advantage of?
Well, her name was Rhoda Hatch, and Rhoda Jean, my dad called her. And she battled asthma off and on over the years, and it could be severe at times, especially during seasons of allergy. And then she also had diabetes, and so she was 73 going on 74. But she had become quite proficient at handling asthma, understanding, how to keep it under control. But in this case, we started noticing a general weakness that came along with what we thought was an asthma attack. And so by the time we got her to the hospital and they put her on ventilator, within a day or so, she was on that ventilator about 8 days and expired.
Larry, your dear best friend, best man, 62 years old, same age as you. When did he pass?
He passed on April 1st. My sister passed on April 4th. Larry was the best man at my wedding in 1983 and August of 83. And then he was the best man when my wife and I renewed our vows 30 years later. We were lifelong friends. Both of us grew up in public housing, went to Dunbar Vocational High School, went to Western Illinois University together. And he was just really, the lifelong friend that, again, the funniest guy that I've ever known, and probably the most loyal friend you could imagine.
Pastor, the life expectancy in West Garfield Park, where you live, is 16 years less than the white neighborhood 3 miles away. Even before COVID-19, African Americans were dying at an alarmingly faster rate than white Chicagoans. Do you think finally that this disparity is going to be addressed, is going to be forced to be addressed by this pandemic?
I think we see crystal clear that poverty kills. It seemed like almost a slow motion kill before this epidemic, because we saw the wide disparity in age expectation and life expectancy. But with this pandemic, obviously, we see that the conditions that people, I want to say, are forced to live under, because these are communities with obscene amounts of poverty, disinvestment. When Chicago closed 50 schools, 4 of them were closed in West Garfield Park. I mean, we have intentionally disinvested in these communities. And so we've seen what slow death looks like. And now with the pandemic, we see what rapid death can look like. We have a moral obligation to respond.
How are your parishioners coping? I mean, how are they managing this?
I'm learning that, our congregation is fairly diverse economically. So people who are in the high incomes, they have a lot of anxiety over what's going on now. But I'm finding that people who are in the lower economic categories of life, people with less money, the working poor, In some cases in my neighborhood, people who are homeless, the people who have housing insecurity. This is an added layer of stress to a life that is already stressful and filled with anxiety. And so
And they look to you, they look to the church, they look for some comfort, and there you are, a lifelong preacher. How is it for you to preach with no one physically in your pews?
This has been the 5th week that I preached to empty pews, and it's been an unusual experience. Of course, when we first started in what we called normal times, I might get 300 streams for my second service. I think we're close to 5,000 streams on our message yesterday.
So the message is getting through, right? Just a different.
You're reaching more people with a different medium and developing a different skill set, how to preach to a camera.
Again, that was Reverend Marshall Hatch in conversation with Carol Marine last month. Artwork made by soldiers and combat veterans is as diverse as the military itself. Chicago is home to an armory of art created by members of the armed forces. With Memorial Day in mind, we visited the National Veterans Art Museum for a virtual tour. Arts producer Mark Vitale has the story.
There is visual art by the author Kurt Vonnegut, whose World War II experience shaped him as a writer and an artist. There are photographs and paintings by women who served in Iraq and Afghanistan. And there are documentary photos of the Vietnam War taken by Laszlo Condor, a combat veteran from Chicago who later became Mayor Richard J. Daley's official photographer. It's a museum with a mission.
To collect, preserve, and exhibit art created by veterans is very simply what the mission is, but really it is to bridge the gap between veterans and society, to share the veterans' story. A lot of people think, well, it's a veterans museum and it's for veterans, but it really is for society, for the greater society, to learn about veterans and the veteran experience. Being a non-veteran myself, there's always a line that I'll never be able to cross, but by coming to the National Veterans Art Museum, I can better understand. And so it's about understanding, it's about talking about it.
It opened 25 years ago as the Vietnam Veterans Art Museum. The museum's base is near Six Corners on the northwest side. But perhaps its most famous work is installed at the Harold Washington Library. Above and Beyond contains 58,000 dog tags representing each member of the U.S. military who died in Vietnam. Many who survived found solace in creativity. Maurice Costello is a Vietnam veteran from Indiana who created a series of self-portraits that depict his journey from innocence to experience. After 9/11, the museum expanded its scope to veterans of other conflicts. These portraits of soldiers were made on protective plates of body armor. Other works depict war overseas and the effect it had on the home front. Some of the art is fiercely political.
It's up to the artist. We're strictly apolitical. Obviously, there's going to be some work in the collection that may have some political context, but that's not for us to decide what it means or is. Our collection is an individual snapshot into the mind of a veteran, but when you look at it collectively, it's about the veteran journey. We're not only an art museum, but we're a history museum. These experiences really shape their lives, it shapes their art. You come to the museum and you might expect to see a lot of combat scenes, but that's not what we are, that's not who we are.
The museum staff looks forward to the day they can welcome visitors again.
The museum is closed, for the time being, and we're not going to open until it's, safe for people to come back. It's hard to come here and not see people, but we'll get back there, and so we're working on our greatest asset, which is our collection. So we're still working, we're still getting our next exhibition ready. We're kind of doing all that stuff just so that we're ready on the backside of this.
For Chicago Tonight, this is Mark Vitale.
The National Veterans Art Museum plans to open their next exhibition in September. The focus will be on the Chicago Vietnam veteran who became the official photographer to Mayor Richard J. Daley. We hope to catch up with them then. On our website, there's more to see about the artwork Above and Beyond, made up of 58,000 dog tags. And that's our show for this Monday night, abbreviated to bring you special Memorial Day programming. Up next, celebrating the 25th anniversary of Ken Burns' landmark documentary, The Civil War. Then be sure to stay tuned at 9 p.m. for City at War, Chicago, a film exploring how the city answered the call during World War II. And don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. You can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And please join us tomorrow night live at 7. What legislation came out of Springfield's special session and what didn't? Plus, a virtual art exhibit explores what home means for some Chicagoans. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for watching and have a good night.
Closed captioning for this program is brought to you by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, serving Chicago as a personal injury law firm since 1984.